He doesn't think we need such a structure. They said, is it possible that we don't? I said, I have an evidence-based model, and yet you allow someone to walk in and say, I don't believe. He said, it's not a religion. We're talking about science. We should ground this in fact. And she said, this director said, well, is it possible that some people don't need such a structure? I had to concede, because this person is very brilliant. I said, perhaps for people like him that are brilliant, they don't need a model. For me, I need a model. I need a recipe. I need instructions in order. I'm not brilliant enough to just carry it all in my head. And fortunately, they conceded that they're not so brilliant either. So, but those challenges will occur. So you need evidence, because someone will say, well, why do I have to spend money to recruit all of these people for my focus groups? I only allocated a small amount of money. So I say, okay, you only allocated enough money to do it wrong. And you're arguing you can't spend enough money to do it right. Is that what you're telling me? Well, but we have to get down to that basic element and say, you've allocated enough money to conduct your scientific study and prepare a manuscript, but you're not allocating enough money to push it to the next state of knowledge. That's a problem. So I challenge government agencies who set the program requirements and set the criteria. When you write your proposal, you have criteria you have to write to. Those criteria are very clear in the research component, but in these hybrid programs, they're not so clear on the development, and they're almost non-existent for the commercial transfer. So I challenge these agencies to clarify the requirements in the proposal, and I ask them, who are the peers? We all understand peer review in academia, but if we're talking about track one, we know the peers. The peers are scientists who work in your field, because they only have an intense, detailed knowledge to comprehend what you're trying to achieve. But in these hybrid programs, you need more than that. You need the scientist as a peer, but you also need peers from engineering. How do we know? Do we think these tests are adequate to demonstrate feasibility? And why not have manufacturers present as a peer, looking downstream to say, yes, they'll do the science, but they have no plan for the business, and then demand business plan. Some of we have these, they're called engineering research centers in the U.S. The National Science Foundation funds them at $25 million, $5 million a year, $5 million per year. In our field of assistive technology, we have rehabilitation engineering research centers funded at $1 million US per year. Each of those centers, in their first year of funding, must generate a technology transfer plan. And that mandate's been there for 20 years. No one ever made a plan. 5 years ago, I convinced the sponsor to require them to come to Washington and present the plan to the sponsor with my team present. We are 100%. Everyone's producing a plan because now it's a requirement. But in the meeting, we challenge them. Where's your market research? Where's your quality of comparative matrix of products? And they get frustrated. They say, I'm a scientist. I'm not an MBA. I'm not a manufacturer. I said, okay, that's fair. I said, you're an academic? They said, yes. I said, are you a statistician? No. I said, but you have a statistician funded on your project. Well, of course, I need a statistician. I said, you need a statistician for the science part of the program. Why don't you also understand that you also need someone from the product development side to give you the expertise you need? So you have to allocate money for all three groups, not just one. Yes?
When you're presenting the book about the Idea Factory, all right. When you're presenting the book about the Idea Factory, you're telling that the Bell Labs needed an environment where there were monopolies. But all economists say that monopoly is very bad for economy and for development of new ideas. So how there's an establishment that says that monopoly is very, very bad. But at the same time, it seems that the idea of a monopoly being good for the science development could be good. So,
Right. And to me, the distinction is monopolies are bad in a free market. I think that's the distinction we make, that monopolies constrain competition in a free market. In this example, I'm not speaking about a free market, I'm speaking about a niche market where there's a failure for industry to provide. And that's the only reason we have these hybrid, this third track. Because otherwise, we have two tracks. We have the grant-sponsored science, we have the contract-sponsored production, and then with no government funding, we have the marketplace. So the only reason we have this extra program that is funding this initiative at CNRTA and funding my agency is that we're trying to fill a market failure niche that the industry won't fill. So I would argue that in that case, why not create the monopoly? Back in 1993, I wrote a paper on towards a single global market for assistive technology.
that's right.
Because to me, the only solution was to create the economies of scale and to equal quality was to have a global market. And it would be more like a United Nations initiative. Because even today, we have advanced technology, but the technology available in the United States is of higher quality than some countries, but lower quality than others. If you go to Scandinavian countries, they have incredible technologies, very sophisticated, because their societies willing to underwrite the cost for the people who need it. We also need to have appropriate technologies for people who live in developing countries, or for people who don't have access to advanced technologies. So an excellent application of the brilliance of scientists and engineers is to come up with solutions that work in these countries. We have student design competitions, and we have contests where for a wheelchair cushion, if people live somewhere where they don't have access to high-tech foam or air bladder technology or pressure alternating cushions, some people have come up with designs where they take old bicycle tubes and they weave them in a design that works very much like a high-tech seating system, but they can use bicycle tubes.
Yes.
So there's advanced technology that we like to balance, but we also have to recognize that we need appropriate technology for people in developing countries, for people in emerging countries, for people in rural areas, for people. Sometimes we get hung up on the technology, or we get hung up on the diagnostic category, the medical condition. And we always say, focus on function. Because if we focus on function, all else will follow. If we apply a logic model, we say, what is the impact we wish to have on society or a population or a function? Once we define that, we say, what products or services do we need to deliver that impact? When we know that, we say, what do we need to support in order to deliver those products and services? Once we know that, we say, what engineering do we need to improve where improvement is needed? Then we know the engineering. Once we know that, we can say, what underlying science don't we understand that would improve? What quantum physics would help us teleport people as opposed to making them reel across the street? So if we apply a logic model, we plan backwards and then implement forwards. And if we do that, we see the funding, instead of weighted heavily towards university-based academic work, it would immediately shift, because we already know so much. And if we only could today give everyone who needs existing technology, we would dramatically improve their quality of life. So right now, it's the market failure at the delivery, at the deployment and delivery and support of the products, and the therapists and other people who are experts in ensuring it's the correct wheelchair, seating system, computer interface. We need to support those first. Yet we continue to not spend that money. And that's exactly what I saw in Australia, where for their national disability insurance system, they had this very nice pyramid. And they were showing in the pyramid how as people with disabilities, as their disability becomes more complex, the technology necessary to support them becomes more complex. Very true, very accurate. What they were missing, what we talked about is adding 2 more sides to make it a true pyramid. We said not only is the complexity increasing, but the cost of the technology is increasing, and the level of skill necessary to deliver it effectively is increasing. So you've got the needs of the user as one side, you've got the cost and infrastructure of the technology as the second side, and you've got the professional service providers as the third side. And that's where we in the United States, I think, made a mistake by not ensuring that we had support and funding for all 3. Because we can have the best, you go to Reatech, you'll see some wonderful products, many of which people just simply cannot acquire. They can't afford it, they can't maintain it, or it won't be a good fit for the person because it wasn't professionally described. So it's really at the delivery end where we have the problem, yet it looks like we're still focusing on pushing out the linear model from the basic science end. That's a difference why under a monopoly condition, we could allocate the funding necessary to make up for market failure.
Yes, it reveals another question about.
We're talking about Scandinavian countries. There's another question that can be revealed on it. It's the paper of the state. I mean, like, what the role of the state has to do with the development of technologies.
But there again, we're talking about markets, we're talking about the market within the country, and then we have to talk about like the market in the European Union. So you've got the country-specific market, and then you have the European Union where they're trying to standardize products across countries. And it's the same in the United States. We have 50 states, and the reimbursement for assistive technology and the training for assistive technology is different in the different states. The resources available to people in New York State are much higher than the resources available to the people in Mississippi. And we have the Ninth Circuit Court in the northwest of the United States. They're ruling against the provision of advanced assistive technology. They're saying it's not medically necessary because we left the technology in the medical model. Even though it's extremely necessary to go to school, to go to work, to go to the community, to recreate, because it's not medically necessary, they're reducing the reimbursement. No matter how sophisticated someone makes a seating cushion for a wheelchair, the government will only pay $300 US for that cushion. And the same thing for a power wheelchair. Say $3,000, $3,000 US for a wheelchair. One of the problems with wheelchairs is people don't know how much power they have in their batteries. There's not a gas gauge for a wheelchair. And there's 2 tandem lead-acid batteries in a power chair. So that question came to my team 10 years ago. And we identified advanced work in electric automobiles where they have in fact created an algorithm to measure the discharge and charge of these twin batteries under load, under high load and low load. And so you could compute how much power someone has, because if people don't know how much power they have, every day they plug it in. And eventually the lead-acid battery memory says less and less power. So a battery that should last 5 years lasts maybe 1 year. And you have to buy 2. It was very expensive. So we had a solution from the electric automobile. We brought that to the wheelchair manufacturers. We said, it looks like it might cost you $2 US to add this little chip to your controller that will monitor the power. And they said, where will we save that $2? I said, well, the customer will buy less, they'll save money on batteries. No, that means you're asking me to take $2 out of my profit, and our profit is thin. So they wouldn't buy this, they wouldn't transfer in this technology because we had a barrier to transfer, which was the level of reimbursement. So unless I could show them how to save $2 somewhere else, they were not willing to install it. Instead, it became an external device called PowerCheck that a person can buy and add to their wheelchair, but they have to pay for it. The problem is it's hard to find PowerCheck because the people who sell wheelchair batteries don't want people to have PowerCheck. Because if they have power check, they'll buy fewer batteries. So it's back to the notion of understanding all the stakeholders and what their values are. And unless we can explain to the battery sellers why it's good business to sell power check, they'll act like it doesn't exist. So it's not that it's not complicated, but it's also not that we don't understand variables and the conditions we're confronted with. But unless we get specific about the problems and the potential solutions, and we design a delivery system that accommodates all those stakeholders in the process, we'll continue to spin our wheels. We'll have lots of research papers, we'll have few transfers of technologies, and we'll have companies offering what they can offer under the constraints of the reimbursement caps that are placed on the technologies. All of which we could solve by throwing money at the back end of the problem instead of at the front end of the problem. And that's a decision each society, each country needs to make, is to what extent they want to empower their citizens to live a full and high quality life. And what's the value of that versus buying another aircraft carrier? You know, our society's values are unbalanced in many ways. And it's up to the citizens of society and those of us who should know better to stop accepting the rhetoric, stop accepting the flow of the money the way it's going, and begin to recognize, are we really accomplishing what we're saying we're going to accomplish? And if we're not, how do we need to change what we're doing in order to better accomplish those results? Again, just my opinion. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm Adi. I work here at CDI for several years. I've been here for several years. Well, if I understood you, I'm not sure whether I understood you correctly or not, but when you spoke about the hybrid model, you showed the premises or the false premises. I'm not sure whether my interpretation is right or not, because in my personal opinion, there is the most or the serious problem, because those premises rule out all the relationships between enterprise and academy, enterprise and research center, and so on. So I'd like to know if you make this clearer, what the impact of the false premises in the environment, in the business, and the relationship between those premises and that model that you've just presented, which is the integration, the conceptual and the operation integration. Is it this model an answer to those problems, which means to those false premises?
I think I understand. I presented the false premises without the counter examples, only because the point was to explain that they're false. And I think most of the discussion about STI policy is still driven by those false premises. And it's not, it's sort of like when I talk about scientific research versus engineering development in their respective contributions. And I'll have people say to me, look, they're much more integrated than you're saying. And I say, yes, I agree with you. But they've been so intertwined that it's almost impossible to recognize them. So I intentionally pull them far apart. It's almost like magnets, because if I let them get too close, they'll be entangled again. So I hold them separate on purpose to try to make sure we have the distinction. Because so many programs, just like that board in World War II, the D disappears. It becomes all about scientific research. In the National Science Foundation in the United States, the engineering directorate only became official in 1982. And the NSF was founded in 1957. So from 57 to 67 to 70, 25 years, it took engineering to be recognized as equivalent to science. And to me, what I saw is the practical engineer, the people who built our civilization, had to dismiss and and detach themselves from their practical engineering and say, no, we're theoreticians too. We're scientists. We'll study engineering. So we went from funding the practice of engineering, which was first through corporations in the 1930s and 40s, and then through government, through AT&T in the 50s and 60s, to not funding any application of engineering. It's like, well, no wonder we're stalling in our economy. No wonder we're stalling in our advances, because we're no longer progressing on that side of it. So to me, partly those false assumptions are costs. They're what we all call opportunity costs. To the extent we talk about those false assumptions or argue, is it push, is it pull, is it this or that, it's distraction from doing a better job of what we're supposed to be doing. To the extent we spend money under those false assumptions, it's an opportunity cost, because that means we're not spending that same money on something that's beneficial. And again, only because we're in a niche market that's already underfunded for people that are underemployed, have insufficient incomes, likely insufficient education because they couldn't access instrumentation of science and technology and that. We need to do something more. So by integrating those methods and load the back end of the process with our attention and resources, we will more likely benefit. Because then we flip those assumptions, and it's like, well, no, it's not that students know everything about what society needs, but companies, in U.S. surveys of industry, they're asked, what is the biggest value in a university? Number one is graduate students. That's what the companies say. We want access to the brightest graduate students in the leading programs. Second, it's the faculty, because the faculty already started to have focus. So it's not as though universities or industry would stop funding activity at universities, and that's what the historical record tells us. That companies were more than happy to fund work in universities because they don't have to pay that person to be there all the time. So it's just-in-time knowledge, right? They find the person who knows what they need to know, and they access the information, they pay them for their time, and then they walk away. It's more like actor network theory, where you coalesce around the problem, and then you disperse. And that to me is more, that's why I mentioned the prize method, where you offer a prize, you know, Richard Branson offers a prize, or someone offers a prize and says, this is the problem we need to solve. We don't care who you are, we don't care what your credentials are, we don't care what approach you're going to take, but if you solve this problem, we will give you money. You know, that's a very interesting way to paint a target on the problem. Now in Europe, in Austria, and a couple of other countries, they have a very interesting voucher program. In the U.S., we have the Small Business Innovation Research Program, the Small Business Technology Transfer Program, where we give money to a small company that applies and has a proposal to do a proof of concept, you know, to do a sort of verify the market opportunity, then create a proof of concept, both funded by the government. And then the phase 3, they have to find a commercial partner to fund the actual commercialization deployment. Europe is taking a very interesting, they're calling it a voucher program. So if you as a small company, you qualify for this program, you say, I think I have a great idea, and I think I've got something that might be worth doing. The government agency will give you a voucher, say for $10,000 or $50,000, some amount of money, and you can take that money anywhere. So you might take it to Unicam, you might take it to Siemens, you might take it to your brother down the street who's got a, but you have to be qualified to receive it. But basically, you as an entrepreneur or as a small company, you decide how to allocate the money. And then the people who receive the money turn around and give it back to the government, the voucher, and then the government pays them for having done the work. And I was very interested in the system because it's a marvelous metric. Because after a while, we look and see, oh, look at all the vouchers coming back from Unicam. They're very focused on helping small business and helping entrepreneurship and market innovation. We're not getting any from the University of Sao Paulo. Now we have a new pot of money to create instrumentation, to fund new instruments somewhere. Maybe we'll give it to Unicap because they're working with industry, working with companies, and not give it so much to Sao Paulo because they're not paying attention to whatever. So I thought, what if we combine the voucher system with the prize? Because there are a number of people who maybe want to compete for a prize, but they still need some money to do the work. In the U.S., we have a program that's called Cooperative Research and Development Agreement, CRADA, C-R-A-D-A. And we have government laboratories, a lot of government laboratories in the U.S. We have 600 laboratories. You may know some of them like Sandia Laboratories, Los Alamos Laboratories, Lawrence Livermore, mainly the ones that work in high energy physics, people know because it's in the paper. But there's a lot of laboratories for military, for energy, for agriculture, transportation, and it turns out there's an authority that if you obtain a CRADA, you can go to that laboratory and you can access their technical knowledge, you can access their facilities, you can access their instrumentation, you can access anything but money. They can't give you money, but they can give you everything else. So for an example, if you know refreshable braille technology, if you know the braille technology, that there's a set of 6 pins that represent each braille character, and if you have a line of text, each letter is spelled out in the pins that are raised so someone can feel the letter by which pins are raised and lowered. Well, traditional refreshable braille is mechanical. It's little plastic pins that sit on springs that will move up and down. And they're very expensive to assemble. It's about $30 US per character. So in order to make a refreshable braille affordable for people, it's one line of braille. So 10 characters, 12 characters, but that adds up. And don't drop it. You'll have springs there. They're somewhat fragile and they're very expensive. Well, an individual came to our center and he was developing a MEMS-based refreshable braille system. So, micro-electromechanical system. So it's based on little pressured membrane that will give you the same tactile sensation as the electromechanical braille, but it was done with MEMS. But this was an individual working basically out of his home, and he needed access to a clean room to assemble the components of the MEMS technology in order to test it. And he didn't have a clean room at home. He needed access to us. So through a CRADA, we were able to get him access to a clean room at a federal laboratory where we could go in and work with. And his concept was to reduce the cost per braille character from $30 per cell to 30 pennies per cell by doing the braille. He's still working on it. Again, it's in the engineering prototype phase. But I mean, that's an example of where if we know where we're trying to go, and we know the resources out there, and we have a way to access those resources, now we have a system. And now we have a system pointed at doing the work necessary, because if he can introduce that braille system that reduces the cost of refreshable braille by 100-fold, now you could have a whole page of refreshable braille. And not just print, but you could do graphics with your tactile graphics using that membrane technology. So you could expand refreshable braille from simply reading print to actually tactile images. That would be a great case example of applying federal laboratories' capabilities to the needs of a very niche market of people with disabilities. So I think by challenging those underlying assumptions, we can say, well, how should it work? And for the most part, we just flip it. It's not that there's not value in those activities, it's just right now the value is not directed and it's not managed. Whereas the examples from Václav Smil's book and the other book, it was managed technological innovation. Now the academics will say, "Oh, I'm an academic. No one tells me what to study." Say, that's track one. I'm not speaking to you. This is not about your program, and it's not about track two, which is more the contract-based one. Well, it's closer to that. But a true hybrid system would use the best of both, not basically the worst of both. And what we have now is we're using kind of the worst of both systems. And as I mentioned, it's difficult enough to succeed in the marketplace when you're doing everything right, when you're doing everything correct. It's much more difficult when you're doing even some things wrong. And right now our system isn't set up to do that. So thank you. I hope that clarifies.
Vamos ter mais duas perguntas. Meu nome é Deise, e pelo panorama que você colocou em relação à ciência, à academia, à indústria, os interesses, o maior prejudicado é, lá no final, a pessoa com deficiência que não tem à sua disposição a tecnologia assistiva. Eu queria saber qual é o papel, se você tem algum conhecimento nos Estados Unidos, nos países que você conhece, qual é o papel deste grupo de pessoas, dos mais interessados, que são as pessoas com deficiências e os idosos. Qual é o papel para que a gente consiga ter essa tecnologia assistiva disponível no mercado? Quer dizer, em que podemos contribuir, em que essas pessoas estão contribuindo nos países que você conhece, para que esse processo melhore, seja mais ágil e chegue a tecnologia até a gente?
Thank you. It's an excellent question. It brings up probably more issues than we have time to talk about, because I know we're supposed to stop soon. But I'll mention a few. In the United States, starting in the 1960s, the independent living movement arose, and it arose at the University of California in Berkeley. And then it moved across the country, and the point was, we are not sick. We do not need to be managed by a physician. We just need access to resources and knowledge about resources that are not available. So centers for independent living, and I know there's some now in Sao Paulo and Rio, different cities in South America, especially in Brazil. There's been a lot of activity for, especially some of the Brazilians who spent time in the U.S. and spent a lot of years talking about building up these centers for independent living. But they're not recognized as a source of expertise. In Buffalo, New York, where I come from, it's near Niagara Falls, if anyone knows Niagara Falls, very close to Toronto, but very far from New York City. I don't go to New York City, I go to Toronto for a nice city. But in Buffalo, it was the second university to adopt Center for Independent Living. So it was students at Buffalo who saw what Berkeley did, and they helped create a Center for Independent Living in Buffalo. And I view that, and have used it, and others are beginning to, as a resource, because we have companies want to know, companies in assistive technology do want to know what consumers want and need, and how to design a product that works for them. But companies have a very difficult time finding people with disabilities to talk to, because they're not easy to find. They're scattered among their homes and different activities. So they have a small number of people that either work in the company or are connected to the company, and they rely on them for all their information. But as you know, as scientists, you can only generalize so far beyond a set group of people. And the more experienced these people become in this process of, consumer input and focus groups, they become too expert to be useful. They can almost anticipate the questions. You want fresh information from a variety of people that you can generalize to a broader population. So my approach, and there's also issues of confidentiality, that you cannot ask people what their medical condition is or what their disability is. There's some limitations on what you can know as a company or even a university about individuals. So, and then there's language barriers. There's accommodating people. If a company wants to have a group of people in wheelchairs, what accommodations do they need? Or they want to have people who are deaf. Maybe they don't know they need an ASL, sign language translator, and they're not comfortable. What if they use the wrong word? We have certain words that are acceptable by the disability community and other words that are not acceptable. So there's a barrier to companies, especially mainstream companies, trying to make their products more accessible for people with disabilities. So what I have done is work with our local independent living center, and I fund them. I give them real money to create a network of people with disabilities in the community. So right now we have a network of about 3,000 people with different types of disabilities, different ages, different backgrounds. So what I mentioned before about conducting industry standard focus groups, we can from those people locally, and then we have other centers around the country if we need to look at geographic differences or language differences, maybe more Hispanic population, that we can recruit the people through the Independent Living Center. And they organize bringing the people to the center. I built a focus group facility in the Independent Living Center. So they send their vans out, and we pay them to transport the people if they're using wheelchairs, to provide, maybe they have dietary restrictions because of whatever their conditions might be. They know how to translate and speak appropriately in languages. So it's what we call a turnkey system. I don't have to know who these people are, and I shouldn't know because of the privacy restraints. But I know the right people are being recruited. And we have in the focus group room, with the permission of the participants, we have cameras. And if we're working with, say, Sunrise Medical, the wheelchair manufacturer in Longmont, Colorado, they can watch the group. Well, the groups, because we do multiple groups. And our moderator is a professionally trained moderator who has a script, and he's going through the Kano methodology properly. But if the company has a question, they can send it to the moderator in real time and say, oh, would you follow up on what this person said about this particular feature? So, and then we record all that material, and we hope the whole structure, and we send all that back to the company so that they can consider it on their own. So, and they pay. They pay some of the cost, we pay some of the cost, and we pay all of that money to the Center for Independent Living. So suddenly the center has a new source of income. They're providing market research to big companies. We've used it for Black & Decker. We came out with an automated jar opener that was better than the products that were out there. And it's for everyone. It's not just for people with disabilities. And so it's for an older person with limited hand strength. It's for a person who's maybe on a phone, a telephone, and you're trying to open. So that the features and functions were designed by people with disabilities. And the company said, okay, you gave us 28 features and functions, but we can only, we've added a cost to each of these features and functions. And we will introduce 22 of the 28. And if it's successful, if it sells, we'll consider adding more features and functions. One of the features requirement was to make the top, because you could put any size jar, from a small baby food jar up to a large jar of pickles in the same device. You could raise it, lower it, and then it could compress the top of it. We said, well, the top should be white, so the motor should be in the bottom to make the top white. And Black & Decker said, well, we have a problem. He said, we have a warehouse in Malaysia that has 600,000 motors for can openers. And no one's buying can openers anymore because the lids are pop-top. They said, unless we can use our 600,000 motors up, we don't want to go forward with the project. Or we have a more compelling business case to build this product if we can use up the 600,000 motors in the warehouse. So the first version of it had the motor in the top. And it became successful, so there was a second, third, fourth, there's been a number of varieties. We did the same thing with Disney, the Disney Corporation. We had someone come to us who had designed an accessible bathroom. So you could move the sink, you can move the bathroom sink up and down. You can actually move the plumbing fixtures to the right and left, so you can make more space or less space or lower for either children or people in a wheelchair. But it wasn't a product, it's the whole bathroom. So we said, well, we can't go talk to one company, and we had the consumers tell us what they wanted and all the features and functions. So it became more than just a sink basin, it was the whole bathroom. We couldn't go to one company because there were a number of companies involved in a bathroom, in the fixtures and features. So we had the idea of going to an end user who might be interested in such a product. So we went to the Disney Corporation and asked them if they were interested in an accessible bathroom design. We thought maybe they would use it in their hotel rooms in Disneyland and Disney World. Actually, the first use, they're putting it on the cruise ships. On the cruise ship, because they said the bathrooms are already very small. And so it would be great if we could adjust some of the parameters. And so once we had the end user on board, then we could attract the companies like Lasco and Ineos, the companies that make the bathroom fixtures, now had a reason, now had a why. You know, we knew the what, and we knew the how from the consumers, and now we had a business case. Why should these companies care about making their fixtures accessible? Because now we had a big buyer. We had Disney as a customer. And now we're looking at some large nursing home facilities in the U.S. who may want to use that. So I guess it's a long answer to the point that we don't, because we're not focused on the end user, we're not recognizing the critical importance of their input and their role. If we treat this like a real business case, you know, if you look at, if anyone reads any business literature, it's all about the voice of the customer. It's all about designing products to work for people. So if we only treat people with disabilities as a customer, then the companies would pay more attention to the not only the accessibility of the design, but the usability of the design. And then both the usability and accessibility of the design of the product in the environment. So we have to put the person and the technology in the context of the environment in which they operate. So all of those factors combine to providing all the information a company needs to make better products. But right now, no one is focusing on the input from the end user. So from the consumer's perspective, you need to be an advocate, you need to organize, you need to explain what your role is, and I can tell you, you will have an easier time than I had 20 years ago. Because 20 years ago, we would go to big companies and say, you know, the population is aging. And as it ages, older people will have more disabilities. So you should design products for people with functional limitations, because you have two groups. You have people who already have disabilities, and you have people who will age into disabilities. 20 years ago, they said, we know that, but we also know it's 20 years from now, so we don't care. So come back to us in 15 years, because we have a 3 to 5 year product development cycle, and then we'll care. So right now, companies care. Companies care about making mainstream products more accessible and more usable for people with all types of functional limitations. People call it universal design, but I would caution that the term universal design is not well accepted by industry, because they don't believe there is such a thing. There's no one product that will work for everyone in every circumstance. We understand the concept is to promote accessibility. And in Europe, we used to call it design for all. So they were thinking, again, like universal. They changed it from design for all to design for more. And that's, I think, what we have to think about. When we talk to a company, we don't talk about serving the needs of a specific population. We talk about increasing their market share for the products that they make. That there's a segment of a potential customer base that cannot currently use their product. So if they only add this feature, this function, these colors, enlarge the print, greater contrast, more text, whatever combination, you can increase your market share. And that's what companies understand, because unlike government and academics, they live in a competitive marketplace. So if their market share goes up, someone else's market share goes down, or they expand the market for everyone. So using, again, understanding the values and the terminology of each of the sectors, and explaining to the industry why they're missing an important customer base of people with functional limitations, either acquired, you know, through birth or disability or accident, and the entire age wave of meeting their requirements as a new share, additional share of the market. That's an argument they understand. So that I think is the most effective thing you can do as a consumer to improve the quality of products, is engaging industry, but engaging industry under their value system. They have to know why, as opposed to know what. You can say, you know what, I can't use your product. And they say, why should I care? You say, because if I can use your product, so can 10,000 other people in my country. Oh, now we're talking customers and market share. So that's the important distinction.
Well, it's a quick question in the last moment. And now that we have all this colleagues here. We are actually preparing the strategic planning of CTI, and we have this identity crisis in the 90s. We were created, I believe, as part of this industrial policy from the 80s, and our focus would be more like know-how and know-why. But in the 90s, with all those neoliberal policies and so on, the academics had started to push the research unities, right? And then some results on know-what started to be demanded from CTI. And now, if you look to CTI, we have three things together here, which is probably a little bit richer in a sense, but also for the size of the institute. I don't know if we have critical mass for all three. I wonder if you can say something. I know you know very little about CTI right now. It's a 600 people environment. But do you see research unities that can have three activities together, and how do you see that being done, and how can we, from some thoughts from you, can we think about this strategic planning we will have here? That's the first question. And the second question is regarding this. Yeah, I have two, very quick. Okay. The second one is very quick. You show this large amount of papers for a small amount of patents and so on, and technology transfers. And there will be always a scientist claiming that, well, that's normal because you need a lot of research papers in order to get a little amount of patents. I don't believe on that. But if you look to Asia, things look very different in that sense, or not? How is the balance? Is it different the way the Japanese and the Chinese and the Taiwanese do their life better through science, technology, and the know-why part, the commercial part?
Now those are incredibly complex issues that you're dealing with. And I know a little bit about CTI before the meeting last October. I went and looked at some of the slide presentations that I could find online, and I did what I always do. I followed the money. I looked at the initial planning and saw, okay, how much money and where is the money going? And I saw, oh, it's going this university, that university, this university. I thought, it's this, it's sort of the same process, because the same people who have the interest are making the decisions, and that's just never a good idea. I mean, it's not good science, and it's not good social policy to have the people who benefit deciding where the money goes. And even the whole, society is questioning the peer review system, because if I say, oh, no one needs to value my work except my friends that I went to college with, my drinking buddies. What a system. We should all work at a job where our friends say, wait till tomorrow, give them more money. But we're supposed to be objective. But we know better. We know we're dealing with human beings. So I guess the idea of having, doing the know what and the know why, and then having to retreat to the know how, from the know how to the know why, and then retreating all the way back to know what. Was there really a need for new science-based knowledge that was absent from the world's knowledge base in the 1990s? I really challenge that. But people don't look like we have always have inventors. I have a great product. Well, what is it? Oh, it's this. How do you know what you need? Oh, I looked everywhere. Did you look here? What's that? People don't know what they don't know. And because the current system benefits, they haven't, that's what we call the need knowledge model. It's sort of a plan where you need to know what you need to know in order to do your job. And if you don't know, you need to know who knows, because you have to make sure they're part of it. Like you can't make a product to meet the needs of the consumer unless you know what they know about their needs, their daily life. So I would wonder if you went back and re-examined the minutes of the meetings, the rationale, the flow of the money, what was the battle, if it was sort of like our 1960s hindsight versus traces, where academia thought, because academia sees the government money as theirs, it's their pot. And whenever money gets allocated to someone else, they see it as a zero sum. Well, if there's more, if there's more for them, there's less for me. So they pull it back. We have the Small Business Innovation Research Program in the U.S. for small business. And small business applies for the money, and they control the money. And if they decide they need a university to work with them, they can allocate money to the university as a subcontract. Well, now we have the Small Business Technology Transfer Research Program, STTR. Where did that come from? Because the STTR allows the university to apply as a controlling partner in partnership with a company. So the academic says, I want more money for my research. Hey, it's you. And they run it, yeah, well, what we do will help you someday. Don't worry about it. That's, their expectation is may someday benefit as opposed to I need something now. So I don't know the circumstances of what occurred. I know there was a recent book by the U.S. Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, ITIF, called the Economics of Innovation. It just came out last year. And Rod Atkinson is the president. And we have a dialogue with Rod. And he said, what we need is, in addition to the National Science Foundation, in the book they argue how no matter what's been tried, it's all falling under the same model. No matter how you try to treat it, it all goes back to the same people, the same interest group. Now we need a National Innovation Foundation, separate from the National Science Foundation. I couldn't believe it. They said, you spent an entire book explaining how it's rigged, the system is rigged, and now we want to create a new institution. What do you think it's going to look like? It's going to look exactly like the National Science. The same people who control the decisions will control the flow of money. It's not going to go that easy. So until we recognize the values inherent in policies and challenge them to say, for the hybrid programs, are we actually delivering what we say we're delivering? And for some reason, there's the knowledge to action model out of Canada, the CIHR, Canadian Institutes for Health Research.